Os voy a contar una anécdota personal con la petición de los que, with the permission of those that don't speak Spanish, I think you can hear it in the translation, que ha cambiado radicalmente lo que iba a decir al principio. No solamente eso, ha cambiado también el espíritu que le vamos a dar a este panel. Y es algo que me pasó ayer cuando acabamos la maravillosa recepción y tan cariñosa en la alcaldía de Málaga. Y cuando llegué a la puerta del hotel, el conductor que me llevaba se bajó con una sonrisa impresionante por la transparencia, la pureza, el cariño, la sinceridad, la ilusión. Me dijo, perdone, ¿usted habla mañana? Y yo, que hablo poco, le dije, sí. Y me dijo, ¿a usted le importaría? Mañana me voy a coger las horas que pueda libre porque quiero escucharles, porque quiero aprender, porque soy graduado de economía y trabajo en un coche, pero no me quita la ilusión, porque he estado en Corea, financiado por el Ayuntamiento de Málaga, durante un mes y he aprendido lo importante de la diversidad. Y porque aunque estoy de conductor de coche, creo en el futuro de este país y creo que hay que aprender. Oye, tal como me iba hablando este chico, a mí se me fueron cambiando absolutamente todos los esquemas. Llevo 20 años en Estados Unidos, tengo cabeza y pasaporte americano, corazón y pasaporte español. Y me di cuenta que aquí estamos para invertir en esta gente, que es a esta gente a la que le debemos todo, que son el futuro, que son la ilusión. Y que estos inversores que están aquí están invirtiendo por ellos, porque creen en vosotros como empresarios, en este país como país, en Andalucía como región, pero mucho más importante, en este joven que estaba allí y que a mí me dio una lección de sencillez, de cariño y, francamente, de valor. Y por ese valor estamos aquí para apostar por Andalucía y por España. I have to now move to English, and I have to thank you, each of you. Some of you have just landed from California. Some of you have spent a lot of time to create a message that is very simple and goes directly to your interests. We want to give this a very, very practical approach. We want to have an interaction of ideas, of questions. We want you to question us and challenge us. I have to tell you that when we thought about what to do here, we said we have to do something that helps you, okay? Helps you prepare for what is coming. And this is investors that will invest in companies that innovate, in leaders that have change so that they can change their companies, in people that are absolutely passionate on what they do. And believe it or not, when you invest in people. And when you get the right investor in the right person, you produce change. We have decided, and we have decided this proactively by them. Voy a mover ahora otra vez al español. Cuando les he contado esta anécdota a ellos esta mañana, hemos decidido lanzar un programa. Hay dos tipos de inversores, los que hablan y los que actúan. Los que quieren invertir y los que invierten, ¿no? Entonces vamos a hacer una cosa. Inspirados por este chico que conocimos ayer, vamos a lanzar un programa, nosotros cuatro, con el apoyo de CEDE, donde nos comprometemos a hacer mentoring de 2 malagueños con ilusión y sin trabajo, para ayudarles a encontrar ese destino que el anterior speaker también nos explicó. Solo hay un compromiso en esto, que vamos a llamarlo ANDA, con una gran exclamación, es que esta gente lo pay forward, esta gente lo devuelva a la sociedad. Y les vamos a pedir que, puesto que vamos a tomar de nuestro tiempo para ayudarles a encontrar el camino de su vida, que ellos cojan a 2 personas, a 2 amigos y lo vuelvan a hacer. Y hay una belleza absoluta geométrica de la gente que lo da, y es que si lo da y lo da eficientemente, se produce un wave, una ola de poder extraordinaria. Hemos calculado que si nosotros hacemos mentoring de 2 personas, y esas 2 personas cada 2 meses hacen mentoring de 2, que no es más que transmitir esta ilusión y consejo, cuando nos reunamos otra vez en CEDE en el próximo año, es posible que tengamos miles y miles de personas que han recibido este mensaje. And that is our commitment. Lo hacemos con una ilusión tremenda, alcalde, por Málaga. Nos hace muchísima ilusión que haya cancelado su agenda para estar aquí con nosotros y le damos las gracias. Había muchos inversores que venían y que querían venir aquí. There was a lot of investors that wanted to come here today. We chose 3 people. 3 people that can talk to you and can help you prepare yourselves for investments, and people that are investing right now. To me, an investor is a combination of a right person, a right professional, and someone that has a track record. You can talk if you have a track record, it's useless. Ramin was the dean of the University of Pennsylvania most important program in leadership. He was also CFO and transformed the university into a loss-making university, into the university today that many people want to go. He's going to talk about leadership. How do you change a company after this crisis so that an investor can invest? Tom climbed Kilimanjaro recently to help someone in need in the US, a great heart. He has been 30 years as a banker and investor at JP Morgan, working with me for a brief period of time. But most important, they have restructured, and today they're one of the biggest asset managers of non-performing loans in the world. As they restructure Lehman, they're helping Chipre find their footing in the new restructuring, and their firm was kind enough to help us in Spain to organize Sareb. Big investor, very thoughtful. Orton has something that has come to impress me, is that I've spent some time with him because he is investing his own money. He's one of the biggest real estate investors in the west coast of America. And by the way, one of the biggest traders in cotton in America. But I've been with him in the last few hours. We were looking at a couple of opportunities because we want these people to help, to invest. And the time that I saw him happiest was not when someone called him from California saying, we've just closed a big deal, but when one of his sons called him with a message that something was not going right and maybe he lost a few $1,000s. And then I realized how important it is in life to thrive with your family. These people are people committed to help. And what we thought of doing is encourage you to ask questions and create a very dynamic dialogue. Success for us is your success. It's not our success as speakers. So thank you for being here. I want to ask you to take it, as we've broken the mold so that we can make it way more informal, just to give you some thoughts about what have we learned in the crisis, how can we prepare ourselves for this way of investing. I think I want all of them to talk about leadership because at the end of the day, as we said, we invest in people. And tell us where you see also the opportunity. We're going to do it in a very rigid way in 5 minutes, and I've already agreed with them that I know how to stop them if they're going too far. So we're going to make it as life is. You know, no, we're not going to, and then we're going to. I've encouraged them to disagree, to talk to each other in total transparency, because investors never agree. Investors that agree on something have correlation of 1, and that's a bad correlation to have. So with that message, maybe we can start with Ramin. Ramin was dean of the University of Pennsylvania, a thought leader in leadership and change. And by the way, I have to say he's a 100 millas marathon runner, con una experiencia humana extraordinaria. Porque el que hace eso sabe sufrir, y sufrir es una gran lección en la vida. Y te enseña paciencia como inversor. Ramin.
Gracias. And thank you very much for those remarks. In America, we have something about the people who run that kind of distance that says that it's a special idiot that wants to go longer than a marathon. So I'm in that category. This morning, this afternoon, I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of insights I've had into the financial crisis, both perspective of having led through it myself at Penn, but at the same time, also having taught so many of the young leaders that have gone out there and have been parts of companies both within the United States as well as internationally. I would like to divide my comments into 3 parts, and I'll try to go as quickly as I can so we can have an interactive conversation. First, I want to talk a little bit about history. And good academicians always talk about history, because that's our go-to place if we don't have anything else to say. But in this case, I'm going to throw out a number for you, and the number is 20. 20. What is 20? 20 is the number of years, on the average, between one type of financial crisis to another since the early 1800s. A group of researchers at Harvard have been studying financial crises, debt crises, monetary crises, and others at 60 countries, and have found that somewhere between 9 to 15 to 20 years is the average of a crisis. And the more advanced the economy, the faster or the shorter the interval. So the first thing is get yourselves off the hook a little bit. it's part of what we're living in. The more advanced we become, the more transactions that occur, the more innovation that takes place in our transactions all throughout the world, the more these will occur. The second part has to do with a little bit more of our making, which is about leadership and about the changes in leadership that has taken place over the last 30 years. We went from what we refer to as the hero model of leadership, where one individual was supposed to come in and make all of these changes and be the person that does the impossible. And we moved to a team-oriented in the last decade. But what we did is we just simply moved the risk from one person to many. We hired a lot of very, very smart people, put them into these teams, gave them individual incentives, and then we found out what very, very smart people with individual incentives can do. And we are sitting in some of the results of that. Now, how do we think about changing some of this? And there is much to be talked about, but I'm going to focus on two components. One is culture. And to talk about culture, I'm going to give you another number, and this is 13. In a study by Gallup, worldwide of employees, they found that only 13% of employees feel engaged with their organizations. That number goes down as low as 6 in Asia and as high as 25 to 30 in some of the more advanced economies. So even 30 is not such a good number. So that tells us that something that we're doing in our leadership is disconnected from the rest of it. And what is engagement? Engagement is a meaningful and emotional interaction that creates real value. That is what's missing, and that's part of what our cultures have created or are aiding. Another aspect of our culture that tends to be more predominant and has come through in these recent times has to do with a culture where we have changed our incentive systems for our leaders. Instead of looking at what it takes to create value throughout the whole cycle of the organization and throughout the whole basis, we are looking at value systems that are very transactional, very monetary, very short-term, and very individualistic. So these are some aspects of culture. The second component that I want to talk about is innovation. And to drive home innovation, I want to talk about one number again, 3. What is 3? 3 seconds. It takes 3 seconds for IBM's Watson computer to answer a question at almost 98% accuracy at the game of Jeopardy. I don't know how many of you saw that, or was it translated well in Spanish. But this number began with about 28 minutes at 65% accuracy, and it got to 3. In 1.5 seconds, Watson figures out what the possible answers might be. In a half a second, does a probabilistic analysis of what it will be, and the last second, it is doing the impossible. It is thinking like a human in trying to understand what the other players might be thinking, and is learning from its past mistakes. I say this because IBM developed Watson in the midst of the financial crisis with all of the unknowns, but they did it because they lived true to their value. Their value system is based on pushing the edge. Now, I used IBM, but I want to use a non-IBM, non-technology. Innovation is not technology. At least as I have studied it and seen it and done, and I'll give you an example. Innovation is simply figuring out how to do something better than it was done before and drive higher value. The wheel has been around since 3500 BC. But yet, the wheel on your luggage that you pull through the airport came to be, what do you think, what year? Any guesses? 1972. right? It took until 1972 for someone to figure out if you put wheels, it makes it easier to pull. It wasn't until 1987 before someone put the telescopic hand that allows you to pull it much easier. So innovation is not always this notion of technology, but rather a notion of thinking about what we do and saying what's missing from it. My last point that I like to leave you with is, how do we not get into these things? Well, as I said at the beginning, maybe we can't avoid them entirely, but perhaps we learn each time. One thing that I have noticed and has been written about by a number of thought leaders is the fact that we are increasingly in our C-suites, in our leadership teams, in our director teams, wherever decisions are being made, we have either turned off the bad news meter, or are unable to hear bad news, or are creating an environment where no one is willing to deliver bad news. If there's one practical advice, is create that environment. Make it an afternoon. Come up with something. And if someone is giving you all good news, perhaps ask the question, what are you not telling me? Hospital studies have shown that hospitals that report the lowest error rates are not the best hospitals once you dig into them. It's actually the ones that report a higher error rate than far above the average, because they're at least telling you everything. And once you admit to a mistake or an error or a bad news, you learn from it. So that to me is a drive home about what it is we can do to make both innovation and culture work better. And my last line is amo Málaga, because I love being here. Thank you.
Dejadme, gracias, Ramin. Mirad, hay un mensaje importante en esto, ¿eh? Muchas veces piensas que porque la gente viene de otros países con capital, con dinero, están buscando tecnologías avanzadas o están buscando el siguiente Silicon Valley. No, están buscando sentido común aplicado a la generación de valor. Aquí hay mucha gente que hace cosas pequeñas. Cultiva campos, tiene jamón, o ya hace trajes de niños, ¿no? Son las cosas pequeñas. No olvidéis las ruedas de la maleta, que se tardaron miles de años en que a alguien se le ocurriese poner ruedas en una maleta. Y él no lo ha dicho, pero tardaron 20 años más en poner la cosa que salía para adelante. Antes las llevaba sin el este que salía, ¿no? Es muy importante, ¿eh? Los inversores no van buscando Silicon Valley, van buscando a la persona que hace con sentido común un trabajo de excelencia, y eso genera un valor impresionante. Tom, you have been an investor and advisor, and you have now structured Lehman Brothers. His firm was responsible for the largest, most complicated bankruptcy in the US. They're advising Cyprus now. They have helped set up the CEREB. They are today actually the largest asset manager in non-performing loans, de facto. But he has been and has had an enormous track record as an investor working with some very large private equity firms in the US that have been very keen to invest here. Give us in 5 minutes a replica building up on what Ramin said.
That's not what you told me to do yesterday.
But build up on that, yeah.
Well, the one thing that Ramin said that resonated with me, two parts to it. One is there is a cycle for crises, and 20 years is considered to be the average. It happens, and it happens because fear and greed are the two things that drive markets. And while things are going well, we all get greedy, and then when things collapse, the door swings the other way, and it always swings too far in either direction. So the question now, I think, for Spain is, where is that equilibrium point going to be, where the asset prices and values will be low enough to clear the market for new investors to come in?
Your remarks now?
Buenas tardes y gracias, Fernando, por la invitación.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. An honor because it's such a distinguished group, and we're talking about issues of such national importance. And it's a pleasure because Spain is such a wonderful country. I came here with an American head and an American brain and an American heart, but I leave tomorrow with a Spanish heart, I assure you.
Thank you.
There are 3 points I'd like to cover today. The first is that Spain will weather this current storm, but I do fear the process and the recovery will be slower than any of us would like. It took a long time for Spain and us in the U.S. to get into the problems that we have. It is going to take each of us longer than we would like to get out of them. The second point is that there is no lack of capital available to invest in Spain, ready to buy the troubled assets of the Spanish banks. And the third, and this is an important point, I think, and my guess is that Eddie will touch on it as well because he invests a lot of money in real estate. The third is that this capital will be committed to Spain only when the returns equal or exceed the underlying risk of the assets. It's a truism, but you need to focus on that, I believe, because we haven't reached that point in Spain. But before discussing these 3 points further, I would like to, with your permission, to spend just a couple of moments talking about Alvarez&Marsal. We're not a well-known firm in many parts of the world because we're a private company. We were started in 1983, and for the next 20 years, we were a 40 or 50-person firm in the United States doing corporate restructurings and turnarounds. And we had the #1 or #2 market share in the U.S. every year, depending on who won the last large assignment. But in 2003, we made a commitment to expand the firm globally, and we've grown from 40 or 50 people to 2,400 people today. Our business in Europe is as big as our business in the U.S. We were known historically for restructurings and turnaround work, but today we have a large business consulting performance improvement practice, which, if you think about it, marries well with the turnaround business, because our consultants are people who have run companies, and so our view is not from 50,000 feet, it's from 100 feet off the ground. And as Fernando was kind enough to say, when Lehman went bankrupt, our firm was hired to run Lehman globally for the benefit of the creditors, $680 billion of assets, and for 3.5 years I ran Lehman Asia. But now back to the 3 points that I wanted to make. These problems in Spain, I know, look intractable. Unemployment is 27% and almost twice that for the youth of this country. And the banks are still saddled with a large number of non-performing loans, and they still need capital. So credit is scarce, and it's hard to therefore fund the recovery that's necessary for the economy. But Spain has risen above crises like this before, and it will again, I'm convinced. It will be your own way, not someone else's. It needs to be your choice about how you do this, and it's not up to me to prescribe that. But recognizing the reality, as Ramin said, as a show of leadership and dealing with the facts is the start. The one thing that I can say with certainty is that every successful restructuring starts with a cold, hard recognition of an acceptance of, in fact, an embracing of the painful facts. The second point, and it's a simple proposition, but it's worth mentioning again, investors simply will demand a return that pays them for the risk that they're taking. In today's market, my guess, but Eddie would know better, is that that's a yield in the mid-teens, but there just has not been a price yet that would clear the market. When it comes, I think you'll see a lot of assets being sold, but we haven't reached that equilibrium point yet. I think we're on the way, but we're not there yet. The last point is that billions of euros are available from outside investors to invest in Spain. My firm, Alvarez&Marsal, has a non-exclusive joint venture with KKR to marry the two talents of our firms to try to buy assets in Spain, and KKR is just one of a dozen or more private equity firms that stand ready to invest in Spain. But they are going to need to believe two things. One is that the asset values have stabilized. And only when they believe that they've stabilized can they believe that they can earn a return that's commensurate with the risk. And it's not clear yet that the asset values have stabilized. So in conclusion, I think there will be many twists and turns for Spain, but new investment will come once there is a price for the troubled assets that both buyer and seller can agree upon. We're not there yet, but it is my hope that the system will unclog itself from this overhang of troubled assets, because that's going to be the first milestone, I believe, to get the economy going again.
Tom, I have a question.
Sure.
You're an entrepreneur, you're an executive, and you get a call from KKR and say, we've looked at your company and we're keen to talk to you. What is the mistake that the person receiving the call should definitely not make? We're in a phase in Spain, and I'm going to let you think a little bit, where many of you executives and leaders of companies are going to start getting calls from investors. And one of the things that we wanted to make sure, and I hope there are questions on this, is, what is the thing, the basic, the basic thing one should not make the mistake of doing. From my personal experience, I think it's very important to be totally transparent, totally confident, and very clear who the company does and where the critical aspects that make the company special. I've noticed many times mistakes where people try to create an image that is not. And investors want to know the truth, because remember, they're investing in people. Okay? We're in a phase now in Spain where there's a lot of investing in distressed assets, but that's not the one that interests us. Most of you don't sell distressed assets. Manage companies that want to receive capital. So now I've given you the time to think. What advice would you give the audience when you get a call from an investor? What is the best way to optimize that opportunity? Or would you go for it?
I learned a long time ago that when someone calls me and wants something, I want to say yes, because at a minimum, I'm going to learn something. So the first thing to do is to take the call and figure out what it is that's going on. You don't want to just shut that person down just because it's somebody that you don't know. But secondly, I think you make a very good point about transparency. And in my 3 decades as an investment banker, I made a living betting jockeys, not horses. So the person, man or woman, that was the CEO of the firm that had a vision, that meant more to me than the balance sheet and the cash flow statements. And I wasn't tone deaf to cash flow. In fact, I was a slave to it in many ways. But it started always with who the person was that was running the company, and did I have faith in his or her character. If I did, then I would believe a lot of things that might not be believable, because people who are of that nature tend to make their own luck, and things tend to work out. So I believe that transparency is a big part of that.
I want to emphasize this. We talked before about selling. You go and you sell, you export, and through the day. Listen, you go out and look for capital. Banks are not lending as much as they could, and for good reason, because they have to face their own challenges. But there is a lot of capital out there. And I think actually a wonderful follow-up of all of this, and I believe in follow-up, is that we at CEDE might be able to organize maybe one of our breakfasts where we talk about how do you go and find capital. There is capital. It's a process of how do you match it. Eddie has been matching client needs and investment needs with what I think is the ultimate investor, is your own money. There's a big difference between people that come and represent other people's money and someone that invests its own money. Eddie inherited a company that was a big company in the cotton trade, and Actually, he has turned it into one of the leaders in cotton trading in the US. And through the past few years, bought up to 2 million euros of real estate, 2 million square meters, 2 millones de metros cuadrados en Estados Unidos, invirtiendo en otros muchos sitios, en Europa, cada vez más en Portugal, en España. Como os he dicho antes, además es una maravillosa persona que absolutamente no tiene pelos en la lengua, que es una expresión que no sé cómo se dice en inglés, pero he has no problem saying things the way they are. So if there's an investor that tells you exactly what he feels, and there are many, Eddie is one of them. And Eddie, we have to thank you because you've come all the way from San Francisco, and he's putting his money to work here, by the way, and in Portugal. Give us your initial remarks, and then I have a challenging question for you.
Okay. Soy 100% gringo, pero yo voy a entregar mis comentarios en mi Spanglish. La única cosa buena de mi español es que gente que habla solamente inglés me entiende perfectamente. Es la tercera vez en España este año, segunda en Andalucía. Estoy aquí a decirles que la crisis es casi acabado y este país que mi oficina puede disfrutar un futuro muy radiante. ¿Qué podemos aprender de la crisis? La crisis estuvo un efecto secundario de una locura, un pánico, una burbuja global en bienes raíces y crédito. Como las cruzadas, manía de tulipán en Holanda, mar de sur pánico, en Inglaterra hasta el web 1.0 burbuja en 2000 en los Estados Unidos, va a estar más delusiones. Por ejemplo, hay una posibilidad muy vera que el social network software tipo Facebook y Twitter están en una burbuja ahora. Si escuchas estos racionalismos, esta vez es diferente. O los fundamentales no son importantes. O que la concurrencia es ganando mucho más que nosotros, ten cuidado. En fin de cuentas, la cosa más importante de aprender de esta crisis es reconocer la próxima, que va a darles en este futuro ciclo la oportunidad de ganar las utilidades perdidas en esto. ¿Cómo cambiar dirección y gerencia? Esta pregunta presupone que es posible cambiar el sistema escolar, política, cultural o económica en este país. En mi opinión, no es posible, necesario ni bueno. Pero mejorar es muy importante. Este cambio es más de estilo y eficiencia en maneras particulares. La España no es monolítica. Cada provincia tiene ventajas y debilidades y es muy importante que esas provincias se piensen de sí mismos como miembros de un equipo y no como competidores por recursos limitados. Con los otros países del sur y Irlanda, es muy importante que España cree una unión que puede negociar con negociadores independientes y endurecidos contra la troika con máximo apalancamiento. En la EU, la verdad es que la interferencia de la EU y Bruselas en las operaciones de todos los mercados está insuperable. No es posible invertir en este mercado sin entender el efecto de Bruselas. España debe poner representantes en Bruselas solamente por comunicar a gente en España cómo disfrutar los subsidios de Bruselas y ayudar a los entrepreneurs de España a navegar Bruselas por fondos de inversión y subvenciones. Voy a continuar el discurso más específico y particularmente cómo pueden atraer capital. Primero, es muy importante reconocer la diferencia entre capital agresivo y capital apoyoso. Un problema mundial es capital que entra en un país, compra, por ejemplo, marcas domésticas y después mueve el empleo, know-how y finalmente utilidades afuera del país. La Italia, por ejemplo, está en medio de esta lucha ahora. De larga duración, este tipo de capital es el máximo peligro para España. Segundo, como dicen mucha gente hoy, Segunda, un problema aquí por inversionistas es que la operación del gobierno no es transparente. No vale la pena buscar capital hasta cuando el proyecto es aprobado. Tercera, es muy importante que el mercado de inmuebles caiga al fondo. Esto es bien mucho discurso ya. Cuarto, cada activo tiene características positivas y negativas. Si quisiera atraer capital o compradores, es importante de enfocar el activo a un mercado particular específico que pueda apreciar las características particulares y no tratar de encontrar un mercado general. ¿Qué son las fuerzas de España? España es un país de enorme belleza, comida fantástica, historia extremadamente interesante y que ofrece experiencia particular y profunda. Todo es muy bueno por turismo, pero hoy como hoy, por otras industrias, el recurso más positivo por inversionistas es el valor de trabajadores entrenados para ganar a los costos. Por el nivel general de educación, la creatividad y habilidad de diseño y otras capacidades del empleado español es la mejor ganga en el mundo. Finalmente, proyectos requieren equity y préstamos. El mejor alternativo por equity es ustedes, sus ideas, diseños, tiempo y riesgo personal. Préstamos, un bandito famoso americano, Willie Sutton, estuve preguntando, ¿por qué robas bancos? Él contestó, porque ya está el dinero. Ahora el dinero del mundo está en 3 lugares, Estados Unidos, Londres y Germania. En estos 3 lugares, como dijo Tom, hay mucho más dinero que oportunidad. Mi aviso es el mismo de Willie Sutton, es necesario ir donde está el dinero. España es un país realmente fantástico. Solamente es necesario afrontar los perdidos. Con este acto, de nuevo, España puede ser España.
Eddie, thank you very much. I'll give you just a little lesson in Spanish. Donde ubas bancos, no, donde robas bancos. Ubas is a grape.
Oh, I said rubas. That's Italian. It was Italian, right?
There is a huge asymmetry in the world. These people come from areas flooded with money, cheap money. We are here starving for money. I would say for credit, okay? Because how, let's flip this for a moment. Just sit there. Okay, a lot of people here, myself included, have things that want to sell and can't sell. We're looking for investors, we can't find investor. So let's flip it. Now they're here, they're in a place flooded of money. How would you cross the Atlantic and go to your office with an idea and capture your attention? I mean, what advice would you give those that want to export their need for money so that they can import the capital into the country? How do you do this? How do they go and find you?
I'm going to answer the question in English.
Yep, yeah.
First of all, I think it's very important for Spanish people to meet the expectations of communication in the market, in the international market. It's very simple, but I don't see it here, and that is that when you have a meeting, you have an agenda, you take notes, and there's minutes, and then there's action steps at the end of the meeting and milestones till you get it done. So that's a basic Anglo way of doing things. I think it's very important that it be fully adopted here. The second thing is, as Tom was saying, it is, we're shallow enough to be in this for the money.
Did I say that?
Huh?
Yeah. I don't remember saying that.
You didn't say that, Tom? I thought you did.
I might have thought it, but I didn't say it.
So, well, we are. We're shallow enough to be in it for the money. So we're going to measure the risk against other opportunities. The fact is, what you need to change. So that what we're trying to do is figure out future cash flows. Future cash flows, it's predicting the future. Very, very difficult thing to do. So what you need to do is characterize with as much specificity and reliability what those future cash flows are to be able to get the best discount today. So you really need to be able to characterize the future in a way that's reliable.
Ramin, let's go back to you. There is a picture that we put. As I told you, we changed the approach on this experience with this driver yesterday and how much we learned from this sub-employed, very well prepared man from Andalusia. And we want to help. We changed it, so we put a picture here of 6 people, of which probably 3, maybe 2, maybe 4 are unemployed. Okay? Investors are shallow enough to be here for the money. But because they have that perspective, they're able to generate wealth so that they can find true long-term employment. Every single person here wants to help those 6 people there so that they can maintain their smiles through the very difficult crisis. So here comes the question, Ramin. And there is no way that we can solve the unemployment issue, and haven't heard today our former president and a lot of people that talked. We're here. This is going to be a very difficult unemployment process. Mm-hmm. Now, we have launched this initiative, by the way. I forgot to tell you, it's called ANDA, because I'm paid forward, because we want Ana to Anda, we want Paco to Anda, we want Andalucía, we want Andalucía, Anda, Paco, Anda, Maria. It's very important we focus on people, okay? Otherwise, there's just big ideas. We hate big ideas, okay? We're here to help you make money, do well, so that you can spread the wealth to help those people. So what can an unemployed person do to make the most of where we are, knowing that there's capital to come, little opportunity here, need to change, at times despair. You have a wonderful story of your own personal endurance and overcoming difficulty. So, and we will invest in places where people have hope and they smile through the crisis. So what message would you give to all of those that are listening to us, many of them in streaming?
I do most of my talking, as you already figured out, through storytelling. So I'll tell another story that might talk about this. This story is actually available on a TED Talk, and we can go listen to it. It's about a young man in New York who found himself, despite having gotten an excellent education from Columbia, with no job. Despite all the doors that he knocked down and all the different people that he connected with, and having gone to a very top university and having had a fairly credible network of connections. So he began something very odd, which was to work for free, period. Work for free. He found the people he found interesting, places that he thought he might want to be involved in, industries that he thought are something of the future, and he simply worked, offered his services to them, said, I can do this, 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 and this for you, and began to work with them. It was only after 2 jobs that he found the most ideal job that he could have ever asked for. He was an English major, so you would say, what does an English major get? Well, he was asked to be an author on a book. And he is now a very famous and fairly well-adjusted young man in terms of his income and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that that's what everybody should do, But I think the message that at least this story gives, and maybe is an answer to your question, is doing something is better than doing nothing. We have a lot of unemployed people in the United States, not in the same bucket. I have a lot of students that are constantly calling me about, can you connect me with this? Can you connect me with that? And I think part of it is expectation. I think people perhaps expect more than what the market can bring. So perhaps changing that expectation. Another is the notion of success. I think our society has put so much value on success being measured by such things as money and cars and the type of people you go out with or you hang out with, and being able to change some of that and finding other ways of success, which might lead you down some corridors of work that you may have not thought of. These are some perhaps ways that might address your question.
Thank you, Ramin. We are in Andalusia, Tom. If Andalusia were in the US, I think everybody in the north would want to live in Andalusia. I mean, Florida in a way is a wannabe Andalusia, Andalusia has a heart and it has a passion. You were here yesterday and you were telling me just looking people, walk and eat and there's a liveliness. But what can Andalusia do to attract solid, long-term, reliable, to his point, committed capital, not the short-term capital that comes, the vulture capital that comes and wants to buy cheap, the capital that wants to build as a partner with the companies in Andalusia for the long term. What can Andalusia do to generate this image? This reality, by the way. Yeah. It's first an image, but then it becomes a reality.
Yeah. Well, first of all, the vulture capital that you talk about, I think there's obviously some of that. But any negotiation requires the two sides to agree. So I'm not sure that vulture capital and long-term capital are that different at the end of the day. But I think it gets down to people, not just a classification of vulture or long-term. The people that you're doing business with, I think, are really important, as I said earlier, the character of the person. So that would be the first point. The second point would be something that you talked about and then that Eddie touched on. One is transparency, and two is the ability to paint a vision of the future that has credibility, that shows cash flows that are both reliable and sustainable, so that there is a vision. In Proverbs 39, it says, where there is no vision, the people perish. So first establishing a vision that is credible, but then backed up by cash flows that are financeable. It's a simple truism, but without it, there's no chance. So whether it's in Andalusia or another part of Spain or places in the United States, the requirements are really simple and straightforward. It's actually having the courage to do it that troubles us, because we're all humans and subject to some of our own weaknesses. But the formula is relatively straightforward.
We want to address your questions on Andalusia, on the situations that you see. We want to make this extremely practical. And while I let you think what practical questions you might have, let's jump to the beginning of the day-to-day where Felipe Gonzalez was telling us about the world and where the world is going and the euro and where is the place of Spain? What is the place of America? Do we have to worry about China or not? Let's move very, very high up now and give us a view of where you see, Eddie, because I know you invest in many places of the world and you're always looking for an opportunity, right? And I know you have recently made some significant bets in Portugal as you build your understanding of the region. But what prompts you to invest in one place or other? Where do you see the big dynamics? I mean, a lot of people here also want to invest. I mean, we have this perception that we don't have capital to invest. Everybody has capital to invest, large or small. Where would you advise people to invest their capital on the basis of how you see the big world going for the next foreseeable future?
So there's two ways to make money: is buy low, sell high, and add value. So addressing them separately, first of all, this average of 20 years in a cycle, that's not my experience. So I got in the real estate business in 1984. I saw my first crash in 1986. It was a Tax Reform Act in 1986, destroyed the US real estate market. We had a run of 6 years until 1992. The market was destroyed by overlending, and we had something called the RTC catastrophe. We then went about 7 years until 1999, and then we had what we called the Web 1.0 bust. Then we went another 8 years, and we had this current 2007 debacle. The cycle is shorter than 20 years. It's about 7 to 8 years, and it's getting shorter as we go forward. As everything speeds up, the cycle is shortening. So what you need to do is, first of all, and answer your question, is watch where you are in the cycle. Right now, you're at the bottom of the cycle in Spain. Now, the cycle is not, I disagree with my brilliant colleague, Tom, that this is going to be a slow recovery. There's going to be two types of recovery in Spain. There's going to be a recovery in Barcelona, Madrid, and Málaga through Marbella, maybe a couple of other locations, smaller markets, but those are the three big ones. And that is going to be a very rapid recovery. And I think the biggest problem there is that you may actually hit another bubble. The rest of the country, so we're going to see this dividing of the world into have and have-nots. And those, so I would only focus my investments in those three markets, and because I think the rest of the country is going to have a real big problem. In terms of the added value part, the best place to invest your money, the best advice I ever got in my career is to invest in yourself. Take your money and do what you do well and invest in yourself.
For a lot of people that own a house with a large mortgage, and they know the house in and out because obviously they live in it, and I mean, what's your advice when you're sitting on negative equity on a home? I mean, I mean, you've been talking quite a bit in the last few hours about repositioning real estate. I mean, you might think you own something that it's only good for residential. It might be the best place for an artist community. I mean, what creative things would you suggest people do that are entrapped in real estate uncomfortable situations?
Well, to quote you, God is in the details. Mm-hmm. And I think what you need to do is look at these assets very carefully, inventory what's best about them, and then use your creative self to see who would like these particular, you know, I'll give you an example. We were looking at a beautiful little village today. My heart, I'm sure all of us, my heart goes out to the poor Christians and Jews in Egypt that are losing their homes and being run out of the country. My first thought was, this would be a perfect place for Egyptian cops. Crazy idea, definitely makes no sense, but you know what? I think it's going to work. So I think you need to really drive down to the details, figure out what are that inventory of advantages, and then think about very specific markets that would respond to the pitch.
Tom, you were in Asia through the cycle of bust and huge investment injection. What have you learned in Asia that you think we could apply in Spain, in Europe, through the last few years that you have lived there?
To Eddie's point, Asia bounced back much more quickly after the financial debacle. So it's possible. And I think you're probably right about the three areas, but I think I'm right about the rest of the country. Asia was a very interesting, it was a very interesting time to be there. And again, to Eddie's point, China, in my judgment, is on the edge of a bubble. There's so many things that the world believes that will just keep going on and going on well in China, but trees just don't grow to the sky. And corruption is rampant. There's no rule of law. Owning real estate is something that is a recent phenomenon. And yet people were owning 2 and 3 and 4 apartments when they had no use for them. But that was a store of value. So as it's a story that we've seen many, many times. And I think at some point China will have dislocation. I just hope that it's not too bad because the rest of us are tied so inextricably to it. But in terms of lessons for Spain out of Asia, I think Spain has already begun to learn those lessons. I'll give you an example. Lehman Brothers was an investment bank, but 2/3 of the assets of Lehman Brothers were real estate assets. It was no longer an investment bank, it was a real estate firm. And it was buying long-term illiquid assets funded in the overnight market. And as soon as the markets didn't roll its money over, it went bankrupt. It was very simple. Back to the cycles. I think Eddie's right. They are getting shorter than 20 years. But Asia did have the ability to bounce back quickly, but it was driven primarily by China's ability to fund infrastructure investments. They have built bridges to nowhere, high-speed trains that don't carry people, and there are lots of empty buildings. But they doubled down on infrastructure when the rest of the world after the crisis could no longer afford to buy its goods and services. They doubled down on infrastructure investment and kept the economy growing. So the danger, of course, for any country, Spain included, is Eddie's point about the next rise in the 3 cities. You're subject to another bubble. I think that we're all subject to that.
May I add something to that? So I think part of one of the conversations that keeps coming up, and so there's 2 points I'd like to make. One is just a slight disagreement with Eddie, although you speak from experience and I speak from, I guess, an academic point of view, so that's pretty much useless in the real world. But I do think that the advice, there is some amount of Spainness, or whatever country one is talking about, that ought to remain in the transactions and the conversations. If one is after any type of a long-term relationship, and investments for the long term are a relationship. Mergers are an excellent example of relationships where the lack of ability to actually understand each other leads to significant failure. So I do think that some of that should be in there. But in terms of the subject of the crisis, and I do agree as well that the more advanced the economies, the shorter the time span. So you're talking about the more advanced economies. The 20 was a worldwide average. That is the crisis that you're in right now is actually an opportunity for some of you, not all of you, but for some of you to find the way to beat out your competition, to find a way to come out as the very top firm when investment is available. Crisis is an opportunity. It's an absolute opportunity for figuring out whether it's the cheaper, faster, better conversation, or whether it's the different conversation, or whether it's the complete innovation conversation. Whichever one of those matters in your particular situation, this is an opportunity to actually equalize the playing field, perhaps with a very large player. So I don't want to let the conversation go without having mentioned that.
Let's move to the 6 people in the picture, right? We've talked about how important to get capital is to be true to yourself, keep it simple, take the haircut, go and look for it, be creative. You know, wheels have been in place for a long time and amazing, only 20 years ago in a place where they really can help us, the luggage. there's lots of things that ought to be learned from the crisis. Yet, if you're unemployed, you cannot pay the business school, you cannot pay to come to these things. How do you make the most of this enormous opportunity to reposition yourself, to learn? So let's talk to the driver that I referred this morning that to me has been so inspiring. We all agree that investing in education is the best thing that Málaga, Ronda, Madrid, Barcelona, Spain, Europe, the world can do. Yet, it's the first thing we cut. It's the first thing we cut. Who pays the price? The 6 people in the picture. What can they do not to be left behind? There's a ton of information on the web, for instance. So tell us, give them advice of how can they counteract the fact that we cut the most important investment in the middle of a crisis, which is usually education. Be very specific. I mean, what internet things are there? The University of Pennsylvania has led, actually, some of these initiatives in MOPS and stuff like that.
Well, we each agreed to mentor 2 people, so you've got 2 more to add to the 6.
Yeah. We have, and by the way, this is serious. So everyone listening here that knows people, through CEDE, we're going to collect, and we'll have to do it on the basis of maybe some luck, but we will take 2, and those 2 will commit to take 2, and 2, and 2, and 2. So that's a commitment also on education, because we believe in it. There's little things we can do. But
so
Ramin, tell us, what can they do?
I think it's important to be very open and honest about the challenge. This is not a simple challenge. This is not a scenario where we're preparing someone to walk up a hill. We're preparing someone to walk up a very, very big mountain. The unemployment within Spain, unemployment within other developed countries for college graduates is very, very high. People are going to be left behind, but the question is how long will that last? So I think it's important that we understand that. The second component has to do with the notion of understanding your particular strengths. So a direct advice is figure out what your strengths are. What is your passion? What makes you as a person different than the other person? There is an adage that says success is a part talent, part passion, and a good part hard work. So figure out where you line up in that. And that is part of the successful ones versus the ones that are still looking for jobs. I mentioned this earlier, but I think it may be seen as a negative, but change your expectations. You're not going to wind up in the, you got an MBA, that may not necessarily mean that you wind up as a manager or a director. I had someone a couple of years ago show up in my office and say, I have an MBA from Harvard, where's my director position? And so that sort of ended the conversation. There was no job. The notion is to help our young people, both whether we are parents, whether we are teachers, whether we are employers, help them figure out what they are good at differently than someone else. That's how we make them employable. Now, you asked for examples. At the University of Pennsylvania, one of the things that we did was I did not want a single master's program that did not have an outreach and a network connection process. There is no point to bring someone in, give them a master's in something, without using the tools and assets of the university to connect them with potential employers. Not to give them a job, but just put them in front of somebody. Help them figure out how to interview. Help them figure out how to put a resume together, how to put several resumes for different kinds of jobs. This might seem very simple, but if you go out and you look at master's programs which have proliferated all throughout the United States and Europe at the major universities, you find very few of them with this outreach program. You find very few of them with the specificity of courses that allows the individual to apply them. One of the other aspects that we did was we required as many master's programs to give the students an opportunity to put together a capstone project. A capstone project gave that student an opportunity to have a portfolio that they would walk out of graduate school with and say, this is what I have done. And that portfolio was a powerful statement. So these are just some small examples that universities can do to do that. And I would say there's a third piece. And the third piece is the realization that college education is not for everyone, and is not for everyone at the age of 18. In the US and increasingly throughout the world, we are enamored with the idea that our kids should go to college when they are at 18. They go and they learn all this information and they become successful. That model worked for many years. That model is not working right now because the field is flooded with graduates. It's further flooded with graduates who don't have passion about the things they studied. And thus, they're the unemployed ones. So part of it is helping them figure out when the right time for education is and what the type of education that they're best suited at, and then helping them achieve that. So that's hopefully our practical advice.
Thank you, Ramin. There is the need to find alternative sources of investors, Eddie. You and I were talking yesterday, actually, and you had this incredible idea. We should set up a financial institution to take the opportunity that there is now to take risk on fantastic projects, fantastic people that banks are not able to capture. Can you tell us more about that? Because this is a crisis that it's going to lead to innovation, hopefully disruptive, for sure day to day, based on creativity. It seems to me, I saw him calling yesterday a friend in California saying, you said it, I have a tiger by the tail. There's an incredible opportunity here. And I have to believe, knowing you, your friends started to call friends in California saying, there's a great opportunity to disintermediate the banks, you know? So tell us more about all those thoughts. And how can they benefit from it? Because the biggest beneficiary is going to be all of us with little businesses here that want capital.
If it's okay with you, I'd rather return a minute to this advice we're going to give these 6 people, okay. 8 people, and then I'll jump into your question. My advice to the young people is outwork, outcompete, outthink, make yourself indispensable. That is the way you get started. For those of you of my generation, and I'm actually 427 in dog years, okay? We have a tremendous opportunity to gain much greater freedom in our lives by using and mentoring and teaching this younger group of people whose skills are actually much more relevant than ours. So we can actually incorporate them in what we do, free up a lot of our time, because that's basically all we got left is time, and mentor them, teach them, and it's a win-win. And
before you answer another question, let me add something here, and maybe we should finish this topic, and we go back to finish the issue of alternative funding. But let's go back to the students, because I think it's a topic that affects all of us as parents. And I met someone not too long ago in Barcelona in a taxi that told me, I asked him, how are you doing? He said, listen, it doesn't matter how am I doing. I work and work and work, and I know it will work out. Me dijo, básicamente, yo trabajo mucho, y estoy seguro que por este trabajo me pagan. Y pensé, oye, ¿qué fórmula para salir del desempleo tú? Trabajar. Trabajar aunque no te paguen. Let's take this back again, Tom, because I'm sure you have thoughts also about, advice to the unemployed from your experience. So let's make sure we all have an opportunity.
I think Eddie said it well. It's just very hard to do when you're that young. So I think that each of us has an obligation to reach back and to help as many people as we can. I really do. But I think that each person creates his or her own luck in many ways. And as Eddie said, there are 2 ways to make money. One is to buy low, sell high, and the other way is to add value. And if you're investing in yourself and you're working that hard and making yourself indispensable, then you are creating value. I've got a 27-year-old son. He's still trying to figure that out. So I'm scared to give advice to 150 or 1,500 people when I can't get my own son to do it. but it is the same message.
Yeah.
Fernando, one other quick aspect that's happening, I think this is a cultural, with this last few generations of college education being a very available and very expected rite of passage, as well as the advancements in colleges and the rankings and the competition among them. One of the phenomena that has been created is sort of this linearity of path, where the individual is already been decided where they're going to go to college when they are 2 years old or 3 years old or 4 years old by where they go to kindergarten and so on and so forth. Now it's amplified in New York City, but much less so all around the country. But what this does is that it has created for these young people a path that all of a sudden ends at the age of 22. It's like they're on a freeway, they're on a road, it's paved, there's lights, there is direction, there is cops along the way, there is all of this information, and all of a sudden they hit the age 22, they finish with college, and the road ends. And this is an incredibly difficult time for these people. I have mentored hundreds and hundreds of students over the years. And now some go right into graduate school, which is another freeway, so that takes them along for a little while. But at some point, these formal paths end. 2 generations before them, this was much more of an irregular activity, so they had to figure out all along the way different kinds of things that kept them on some kind of a road. For this generation, we have to understand the unemployment rate, these individuals that we see, in some ways, we parents, employers, teachers, we have created them. We have created the sense of linearity in their world, of the one-dimensionality that says you do this, then this will happen, and you do this, and then this will happen. But then there's a point in everyone's life where there is a wide open sky. You use a variety of methodologies, you outwork the other person, you do a lot of different things to figure out how to get to the next step. So part of it is our recognition and ability to then tap into that and work with them on that.
We're going to wrap up in 5 minutes. Let's go to the question, which is very practical. How can we access capital when banks don't give it to us? And tell us about the idea you had, which I thought was very intriguing.
Well, I think Tom really said it very well. There is no lack of capital. There is absolutely no lack of capital in this world. The good deals will get all the capital they want. If you're not getting capital, you're probably not offering a good deal. There is no lack of capital. You're either not offering a good deal or you're not talking to the right people. And again, most of the right people are not in Spain. They're in Germany, New York, and London.
If Spain is such a good opportunity, how much will it cost in all means to become a reality? The fact of the matter is that everybody talks about the big opportunity that this is, yet Felipe González was telling us that we might be in for a portrayed period of being in the bottom. But what does it take to see this, this big V-shaped recovery? What are the early indicators that you will say, yeah, it's working the way I'm thinking?
Very brief and aggressive action by the banks to lower the cost of real estate assets momentarily below the bottom. And that people would start to buy and the whole thing would turn around. It's going to require an aggressive reduction of real estate, because almost all this crisis has to do with real estate and credit. You reduce the price of these real estate assets very momentarily to the point where people will just snap them up and the market will drive these prices back up. I don't know, that seems like
Tom,
what
what
you
do
were
you think?
saying too.
I think that's absolutely right. There hasn't been a price yet that would clear the market. As soon as there is, I said in my opening comments, it's a milestone, major milestone. Things turn quickly after that. But until you get that, you're just treading water.
How do you know what something is worth when there is not a market?
Because someone comes along and buys it.
It's worth what someone will pay you for it at that point.
Ramin, America is leading the way in the recovery.
It thinks.
It's in many ways. I mean, it's amazing what we're seeing there, you know, or
We
it
think
thinks.
we are.
But tell us all, since you're all deep embedded in America, tell us what is going on there, what is to follow, what is to avoid, what are the big mistakes that we ought to avoid that we've seen they're making, what are the big lessons that they can give us?
Well, I'll speak more generally, and these folks are much more eloquent on the subject, and certainly in the financial markets. But I don't think we have learned the moral lessons from this crisis at all. I think we're still very much enamored of the heroic leadership in some places and the super high IQ dependency in other circles, both of which have some challenges. I don't think we have broken the board's understanding of their organizations. I think there's still many boards that don't really understand their organizations, at least as I talk to some of them. And I think they're not asking the tough questions. The questions tend to come, certainly at the university, the board made up of some very illustrious. They ask questions right at that moment, but then within a few months take the foot off the gas, let the people do their thing. And I'm not suggesting that we should be heavily involved in operation as board members, but we should be asking a lot more questions. So, you know, the crisis, yes, some aspects of it will go away. Things have picked up. We're doing a number of different aspects of the economy. One can look at the numbers and say things are better. But our unemployment rate among college graduates is still high. Unemployment rate, and the underemployment rate is very, very high. And these are the things that I think we have challenges in the United States to address.
Tom.
I think the hardest thing for any of us to do is to keep our heads when the rest of the world is losing theirs. We're human beings, and when there's euphoria, we all want to believe that, and when there's a crash, we all believe that the world's going to come to an end. And neither extreme is true. And I do believe that fear and greed drive markets. And right now there's a lot of pent-up greed ready to invest in places like Spain. But as Spain and the US come out of the doldrums, the cycle will repeat itself, and the people that are going to make a lot of money are able to, one, see around the corners that others cannot, and two, keep their heads when everyone else is losing theirs on the up and the down. It's very hard to do because we're human beings.
Eddie?
I think that there are a lot of, I agree with Ramin that we Americans have not faced the moral issues that came out of the crisis, and that we really paved over it. But there is one thing that Spain should learn from not only the United States, but also Germany, which is your laws of employment are completely antiquated and are causing all of this unemployment. You need to adopt some other countries, just get rid of all your employment law, because it is destroying this country, and adopt another model from another economy, whether it be the United States, whether it be Germany, whether it be New Zealand, wherever it is, but adopt an employment law that does not penalize employers for hiring people.
We're going to wrap it up. I have actually 7 fantastic news here. But before we wrap it up, and I share this incredible good news, is there any final statement you want to make? Ramin? Eddie?
Spain is going to be fine.
Ramin?
I'm going to stick with Amo Malaga.
Tom?
I hope you'll invite me back next year, and I can't wait to see what progress we've made with the 2x2x2.
Excellent. Este proyecto de Anda y el nombre de una persona, Andalucía, que es tan bonito, nos lo hemos tomado muy en serio. Os voy a dar la increíble noticia, que a mí realmente tengo que reconocer que me emociona. Han llegado preguntas, pero han llegado 7 notas. Esto es increíble, ¿eh? para que veáis qué tipo extraordinario de gente tenemos. Una de ellas, por favor, ¿dónde y cómo podría presentarse un proyecto de inversión? Proyecto de base tecnológica software en mejora de desempleo y rendimiento. Gracias, Fernando. Mis datos son Enrique Fernández Gilés, teléfono y email. So let me tell you, Fernando, Enrique Fernández Gilés, no sé dónde estás, I don't know where you are, but see me at the end, and we're going to follow up on this, okay? Ven a buscarnos porque vamos a seguir. No hay nada más maravilloso que la gente que coge la oportunidad. Tengo otra aquí que es de las que he recibido, la escojo porque son las 2 que yo voy a tomar y cada uno de ellos recibirá las suyas. Me encanta además que tengan nombres. Esto es Juan Manuel. Y fijaros qué proyecto tan impresionante, ¿eh? Actualmente estamos realizando un lanzamiento de una plataforma para conectar a la ciudadanía con los políticos a nivel europeo, de forma transparente. El equipo actualmente está formado por 2 equipos, desarrollo y político. El desarrollo está en Málaga, enhorabuena, Juan Manuel. El otro está en Ginebra. Me da su nombre, equipo, las personas que son, su email. Estamos muy interesados en el mentoring. Mira, Juan Manuel, igual que Eugenio esta mañana, eres un fantástico ejemplo con los otros 7 que tengo y con los muchos que seguro, espero, se están creando, de cómo en Málaga se escucha. Todo lo que hemos hablado hoy de la necesidad de cambiar y que el cambio somos nosotros. Oye, lo estáis demostrando con vuestras notas. Y con esa maravillosa hospitalidad queremos cerrar esto. Agradeciéndoles al alcalde porque sé que incluso ha cambiado su agenda para estar aquí con nosotros. Y yo estoy asombrado porque no le veo hacer más que tomar notas. Y es una lección, otra vez. O sea que, to all of you, thank you. We mean what we say. Queremos realmente, sentimos lo que decimos. Y mucho más importante, como dicen en la lengua inglesa, we walk what we talk. Andamos lo que decimos. Nos hemos comprometido, we have committed here to do something, we do it for you. We want to see you a year from now and see that this Andalucía program of mentoring takes us all one more step forward. Como decía Eddie ayer, le preguntaba, Eddie, ¿cómo se soluciona una crisis? Me decía, mira, esto es como comer un elefante. En su inglés peculiar decía, mordita, mordita. So we will eat this elephant one little bite at a time. Thank you very much, Cede. It's a wonderful opportunity for us to be here. So thank you to all of you too.
Thank you.